There is a silent question that has crossed centuries, one few people dare to ask out loud. What if real power doesn't belong to the good? What if it belongs to the cold? Think about it. The people who dominate companies, governments, wars, and empires are rarely the most empathetic in the room. More often, they are the most calculated, the least affected by the emotions of others. History repeats the same uncomfortable pattern. Those who can switch off feelings in decisive moments often rise faster. And this raises a disturbing question. Does empathy weaken us? Does morality get in the way? Or are we confusing coldness with something deeper? Because there is a difference between being cold and being free from your emotions. And that difference changes the entire game of power. Most people believe they make rational decisions, but neuroscience shows something different. Almost all our choices are emotional, and only afterward do we invent logical explanations to justify them. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio studied patients who lost their emotional processing. Their intelligence remained intact, their memory and logic too. But they couldn't make decisions. Choosing clothes, choosing a restaurant, choosing between meetings. Everything became an endless stalemate, because without emotion, there is no priority. Without emotion, there is no urgency. Without emotion, there is no choice. Emotions are the invisible engine of human behavior, but those who understand this engine can drive it. And those who drive human emotions drive people. Imagine two individuals. The first reacts emotionally to everything. Criticism hurts him. Rejection paralyzes him. Conflict exhausts him. He needs approval. Now imagine the second. He observes emotions, but isn't controlled by them. He can hear insults without losing focus. Make difficult decisions. Say no. Act even when others disapprove. Who will influence the environment more? This difference was noticed centuries ago. In the 16th century, Machiavelli observed how leaders actually behaved. He noticed something uncomfortable. Rulers who tried to be good all the time often lost power. But rulers capable of acting coldly in strategic moments maintained it. This didn't mean cruelty. It meant understanding a basic rule. The world doesn't run on good intentions alone. It runs on power, and power requires difficult decisions. But coldness doesn't always look cruel. Most of the time, it looks like calm. The Stoic philosophers understood this well. Thinkers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius believed the greatest power was not controlling others, but controlling yourself. They called this apatheia, not the absence of emotion, but freedom from being ruled by it. When someone masters their emotions, something interesting happens. They begin to see human behavior clearly. While most people react impulsively, they observe. While others argue, they analyze. While chaos spreads, they remain stable. And that stability creates something powerful, psychological authority. The human brain interprets calm during difficulty as competence. That's why leaders who remain composed in crises gain respect almost automatically. But this same emotional control can create wisdom or manipulation. Carl Jung believed every human has a shadow, the hidden side of the personality. Ambition, domination, the desire for power. Most people try to deny these impulses, but when they are ignored, they don't disappear. They become unconscious. And those who understand these impulses can predict human behavior. Now look at the modern world. Social media, politics, influencers. A tweet or speech can trigger millions of emotional reactions within minutes. Anger, admiration, outrage. But who controls these waves? Usually not the most emotional people, but those who know how to trigger emotions, because highly emotional people are easier to influence. Not because they are less intelligent, but because emotional reactions are predictable. This is where Nietzsche offers another insight. Most people live inside inherited moral systems that define what is right and wrong. These systems help societies function. But those who step outside them gain a psychological freedom most people never experience. They realize many social rules are human constructions, and human constructions can be manipulated. But here lies a dangerous misunderstanding. Many people think power comes from becoming cold and emotionless. That is a mistake. True influence does not come from the absence of emotion. It comes from mastery of emotion. There is a huge difference between not feeling and not being controlled by what you feel. What builds civilizations, movements, and ideas is not coldness. It is self-mastery. And this matters even more in the modern world. We live in an era of constant emotional stimulation. News, online arguments, social comparison, pressure everywhere. The more emotionally reactive someone becomes, the easier it is to manipulate their attention. Because attention follows emotion. If something provokes anger, fear, or outrage, you pay attention. Social media algorithms exploit this constantly. Strong emotions generate more engagement, more shares, and more visibility. But those who benefit the most are rarely the ones reacting. They are the ones provoking the reaction. And provoking reactions requires emotional distance, observation, pattern recognition. Now we reach a disturbing conclusion. Maybe power doesn't belong to the cold. Maybe it belongs to the conscious. Those who can observe their own emotions, those who can pause before reacting. Because between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies human freedom. But this raises a final question. If most people react emotionally, and only a few learn to master those reactions, what happens when someone with self-control enters an environment full of emotionally reactive people? Influence becomes almost inevitable. And this is where the line between leadership and manipulation begins to blur. Some use this power to create stability, others to dominate. And when researchers began studying which personality traits often appear in positions of power, the results were alarming. Because maybe the problem isn't only those who seek power. Maybe the problem lies in those who choose to follow them. And understanding that may reveal something deeply uncomfortable about human nature itself. There is a quiet pattern running through centuries of human history, a pattern that appears in ancient empires, modern corporations, politics, social networks, and even small workplaces. Certain personalities seem to gravitate naturally toward power. And when researchers began studying this phenomenon scientifically, they discovered something unsettling. traits linked to what psychology calls the dark triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, appear more frequently in leadership positions than in the general population. This doesn't mean every leader has these traits, but it does suggest that environments of power tend to favor individuals with very specific characteristics. Characteristics that, to many people, look like coldness. Narcissism involves a strong need for admiration, recognition, and a sense of superiority. Machiavellianism involves strategic thinking, social manipulation, and prioritizing goals over moral principles. Psychopathy involves low emotional empathy, little guilt, and a high tolerance for risk. When these three traits combine, they form a personality that can be extremely effective and potentially dangerous. But there's an important detail. These people rarely appear monstrous. In fact, they often seem like the opposite: charismatic, confident, decisive, certain. They speak clearly. They make decisions quickly. They don't hesitate in conflict. And for the human mind, these signals often create the impression of competence. Our brains evolved to interpret confidence as a sign of leadership. But confidence and wisdom are not the same thing. Still, in moments of social, economic, or political uncertainty, crowds tend to search for exactly this kind of figure. Someone who seems unshakable, someone who radiates certainty, someone who speaks as if they have all the answers. And this creates a psychologically dangerous dynamic. The more emotionally insecure a group feels, the more attractive a seemingly cold leader becomes. Social psychologists have observed this pattern during periods of collective crisis. In times of stability, societies value cooperation. But in times of fear, they search for authority. And authority often appears in people who seem immune to the emotions affecting everyone else. That appearance of control creates a sense of safety, even when that control is only an illusion. But there is an even deeper aspect of human nature at play. We don't just follow emotionally distant leaders. We often project onto them something we wish we possessed, because everyone knows what it feels like to be overwhelmed by emotion. Anger that explodes, fear that paralyzes, anxiety that drains mental energy, doubt that blocks decisions. So, when we see someone who appears immune to these forces, something inside us admires that strength, even if it's only a facade. Carl Jung described this as psychological projection. We project qualities we desire or repress onto external figures. That's why powerful leaders often appear larger than they really are. They become screens onto which crowds project hope, frustration, anger, and the desire for change. But here is something fascinating. The more emotionally reactive a population becomes, the easier it is for manipulative figures to rise. Because emotional manipulation follows predictable patterns. Fear creates urgency. Anger creates unity against an enemy. Pride creates collective identity. Hope creates loyalty. These four emotions are often used to direct behavior on a massive scale. Anyone who understands these mechanisms gains a powerful advantage in the social arena. But here, we reach a critical crossroads. There is a massive difference between understanding human psychology and exploiting it. That difference defines two completely different kinds of power. The first is manipulative power. It depends on ignorance. It feeds on emotional reactivity. It relies on narratives that trigger primitive impulses. This kind of power can grow quickly, but it is rarely stable because it feeds on chaos. The second form of power is quieter, less visible, less dramatic, but infinitely rarer. It is the power of self-mastery. Socrates once said, "The greatest ruler is the one who rules himself." At first, that idea sounds simple, but when we examine it closely, it becomes radical. Because ruling yourself means understanding your own emotions, recognizing your impulses, noticing when your ego wants to win an argument just to feel superior, seeing when fear tries to avoid a difficult decision, recognizing when the need for approval distorts your behavior. Most people never develop this awareness. They live reacting, responding automatically to stimuli, defending identities, seeking validation. And when someone with true self-control enters this environment, something interesting happens. They appear cold, but in reality, they simply aren't reacting impulsively. They observe before acting, listen before responding, evaluate before deciding. This difference is subtle but enormous. Reactive people are predictable. Self-aware people are strategic. But here, we must face an uncomfortable truth. Self-mastery can also be used for manipulation, because understanding human emotions creates the ability to influence them. And that ability can be used in two ways: to liberate or to control. This is where Nietzsche returns to the center of the discussion. He believed humanity needed to move beyond old moral systems based purely on obedience. He believed strong individuals would create new values, but this idea has often been misunderstood. Many interpreted strength as domination, as emotional coldness, as superiority. But Nietzsche was pointing to something deeper: psychological strength, the ability to confront one's own mind, to look inward and recognize dark impulses without being ruled by them. This kind of strength is rare, extremely rare, because it requires something most people avoid: brutal self-knowledge, admitting ambition, admitting envy, admitting the desire for power, admitting the need for recognition. When these forces are ignored, they control behavior unconsciously. When they are recognized, they can be transformed. And this is where the true difference between coldness and awareness appears. Coldness is the absence of emotional connection. Awareness is emotional mastery. A cold manipulator sees people as tools. A conscious individual sees people as human beings, but refuses to be controlled by every emotional trigger. That difference completely transforms the nature of power. Power built on manipulation creates fear. Power built on self-control creates respect. And respect produces something far more stable than fear: trust. Which leads to the final question. If emotionally reactive people are easier to manipulate, if cold leaders can exploit those emotions, if genuine self-mastery is rare, then what determines the kind of power that dominates a society? The answer may be simpler and more unsettling than it seems. The type of leadership that emerges reflects the collective consciousness of those who choose to follow. Emotionally immature societies tend to choose dominating leaders. Psychologically aware societies tend to value balanced leaders. So perhaps the question, does power belong to the cold, is backwards. Maybe the real question is different. Why do so many people give power to those who appear cold? Once we understand this dynamic, something liberating becomes clear. The game of power does not begin in palaces, not in governments, not in corporations. It begins inside the human mind. The moment someone learns to observe their own impulses, the moment someone stops reacting automatically, the moment someone recognizes emotional manipulation, that moment changes everything. Because a conscious mind becomes extremely difficult to control. And when many conscious minds begin to exist within a society, the type of power that dominates that society inevitably changes. Maybe power never belonged to the cold. Maybe it always belonged to those who mastered something far more difficult than ruling people, their own mind. If this reflection sparked something in you, I'd like to leave one final question. Do you believe the world is dominated by cold people? Or by people who simply learned to control their emotions better? Write your perspective in the comments. And if reflections on psychology, philosophy, and human behavior resonate with you, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Here, every video is a journey into the invisible forces shaping our decisions, relationships, and society. See you in the next video.